Live from the SABC's Auckland Park studios, welcome to this midweek edition of the Watchdog. My name is Vuyo Mvoko. The more things change, the more they stay the same, say opposition parties in Parliament. They are taking issue with the Ramaphosa administration promising openness, transparency, a war against corruption, but the governing party not rising to the occasion when opportunities to deliver on the promises present themselves. We speak to UDM President Bantu Olomisa about what this may mean for the body politic. And staying with parliamentary matters, we bring you the latest between the Public Protector and the National Assembly Speaker. They are back in court after Mkhwebane filed an urgent court application aimed at halting the parliamentary impeachment proceedings that are against her. Calls for Arts, Culture and Sports Minister Nathi Mthethwa to go reach fever pitch. This on the back of the latest saga involving a 22 million rand flag. All those stories and more in tonight's episode of The Watchdog, which starts right now. Well, UDM President Bantu Olomisa has received a letter from the National Assembly Speaker after he and several other opposition party leaders raised issues with the National Assembly Speaker over, among other things, the issue of the state capture inquiry report and what to do with it. The letter reads, "Dear Mr. Olomisa, meeting with opposition party leaders. Your request for a meeting between myself and opposition party leaders bears reference. I propose that we meet on Wednesday, the 25th of May, 2022 at 12 in Parliament. A venue will be communicated in due course. May you kindly indicate beforehand the items that you wish the meeting to discuss. Yours sincerely, Ms. N.N. Mapisa-Nqakula, MP, Speaker of the National Assembly." Well, for a bit of history and background to this issue and why it matters so much, we are joined on the line by UDM President Bantu Olomisa. General Olomisa, good evening. Thanks very much for your time.
Good evening, Vuyo, and good evening to the viewers of this program.
Give us a bit of history, background to the request that you made to the National Assembly Speaker. What was it about and why did you feel a need to write to her about it?
You will recall on and about 15th of March, the leaders of the opposition had a meeting. And among the resolutions of that meeting was that we should request a meeting between the Speaker and ourselves in order to look at the findings of the Zondo Commission and the Party Commission and ask her how she is proposing to move forward with it. Because at that stage, there was a talk that the Parliament cannot touch the findings, which were published already, of the Zondo Commission. We would have to wait until the President has applied his mind and come back with the how he is planning to implement those findings. We find it odd with that process. Hence, we asked to meet the Speaker. She has, of course, it took her time because we wrote this letter to her on the 18th of March. And she recently said yes. But of course, today she finally, as you correctly put it, after we pressurized her, she has finally gave in. So we'll be meeting her on Wednesday next week. The leaders of the opposition other opposition parties. I've informed them this morning, and the majority of them have said yes, they are attending the meeting. But before that, around 10:30 on Wednesday, the leaders of the opposition will be meeting to remind each other and also to make sure that we present one common position as to what are we expecting from the Speaker and indeed the Parliament to handle this issue of this commission, given that these findings of the Mzondo Commission are implicating the ruling party in a big way.
Now, we have a history. That history was also captured and is in fact part of the state capture reports, or parts of the report that we have already received, where findings were made against Parliament, how Parliament didn't do the work that it is supposed to do or mandated to do by the Constitution. And presumably, that's the reason you've had to take this issue up with the National Assembly Speaker.
Yes, I confirm that Zondo didn't spare Parliament in his finding when it came to oversight. It is precisely because of that reason that the ruling party, which has now been fingered, not only the leaders, but the party itself, tend to use their majority to bulldoze certain positions in Parliament. We would have to look at, if, for instance, there's going to be a special committee to look into this, what would be the composition of such committee to look into the legislative process? Which legislative processes must be, or legislation must be changed to make sure that no political party ever again be in a position to utilize the state resources without permission. That is a brazen institutionalized corruption. We can't give it another name. So when we meet the Speaker, therefore, we would be interested to hear from her. Are you still going to put your ANC members as majority in a committee which will be looking into the implementations of the findings, even though you have been fingered?
But isn't that what the voters have given us? In other words, the ANC is in the majority by far. Why would you want to tamper with that? Isn't that anti-democracy?
No, elsewhere in other countries, in actual fact, the opposition parties are given more time to scrutinize, and more time and members to scrutinize the ruling party. So the voters of South Africa has never given the ANC a right to loot the resources of the state. So this is not an ordinary situation. We're dealing with a crisis here where the Zondo Commission has said the ANC has siphoned millions, if not billions of rands from the state.
Well, I mean, South Africans may not have given the ANC the right to loot, but they did give them the right to rule.
That's fine. They have given them to run the country. But at the same time, if we want to prevent the recurrence of this looting, we have to come up with some tight regulations. And those regulations and laws, unfortunately, would not have to be steamrolled or be pushed over by a corrupt regime.
And I don't think...
even if it means, therefore,
General.
it means, therefore, in future, we must go to the Concord to say this is not fair that the ruling party, which has been fingered, now wants to correct itself in Parliament by making laws which are absolving them. No, we cannot allow that.
Now, forgetting for a second what the president had to say about applying his mind and so on, what or were you at any point given any reasons by the National Assembly Speaker as to why Parliament in particular can't do its work? Did she, and if that happened, did she cite the fact that the president was still applying his mind as a reason for a reluctance on your account, for Parliament to do what it is supposed to do constitutionally?
Well, the Speaker must be embarrassed as we speak today, because the President yesterday said Parliament can discuss this on the Commission. Yet, a few weeks ago, if not last week, the Speaker and the majority party were refusing to that party, the Parliament must discuss these reports. They were still clinging on what President had said earlier, that he would come back to Parliament and discuss his response on the Commission. So I think our pressure last week, where we published that we will be meeting the party leaders, as well as civil society and other parties outside Parliament, I'm sure they have decided this past weekend to review that their position. Hence, yesterday, the President has said, no, you can go ahead and discuss these reports as a Parliament. So, a decision which we welcome. So it's unlike what the Speaker was trying to do. So, but of course, these people, they work with a view to say, where will my supper come from?
We are where we are as a country due to, small measure, steps that opposition parties, NGOs, pressure groups, had to do, taking the government, taking Parliament to court for the executive, for the national legislature to do what it is supposed to do. And when President Cyril Ramaphosa came on board, or became got to be elected new president, there was a promise that things will change for the better, and that the governing party in particular will endeavor to do all the right things. What would you say has been your experience as opposition parties in particular?
Well, let's give a credit where it is due. President Ramaphosa has done his bit, notwithstanding that there are obstacles within his own organization, as well as the slow pace on the part of some institutions in the country, such as NPA. But I think overall, if the police, the Hawks, the SIU and NPA were to pull up their socks, I'm sure by next year, June, we would be speaking a different language. But there are still a lot of challenges facing him, because it would appear that there are revolt within his own organization against him. So, but that's the matter of the ANC. But as far as the running of the state, we have a role to play as opposition parties. Make sure that these comrades in corruption stop using state resources against opposition parties, because the playing fields are not leveled in the process.
So you're saying he is not to blame, he's trying his best. Would I be correct in summing it up that way?
He is trying his best, but I wish one day he can be a little bit stronger and draw the line and tell the people that you dare to cross that line. This is what the country demands of you, especially on issues related to security as well as lawlessness, which we are confronted with every day. So I hope if he can improve on that, at least the people will regain their his confidence.
Well, I mean, as much as he is in charge of or responsible for and appoints, ministers responsible for the criminal justice system broadly, in fact, every cabinet minister, I'm sure you've heard the retort that what the NPA does is beyond his control. What the Special Investigations Unit does is beyond his control. He can't tell the courts how to conduct themselves and the pace at which, they need to, do their work. So, because to do that would mean that he is interfering and would also, empower his opponents within the ANC to say he's using state resources or the state apparatus against some of his political opponents.
Well, we speak the same language, Fuyo, because I didn't say that he is expected to issue instructions, but I'm saying he could be looking better if some of the institutions which are supposed to do their work had done so. But they have been tardy, unfortunately, too slow for the liking of many. So, but at the end of the day, he is accountable for those institutions are accountable to him. For in what way? If they complain that there is no budget to do their work, they need expertise. So the cabinet, which is chaired by the president, has to come up with a plan, not necessarily to say, go and arrest so-and-so. We know that. We're not going to be educated about that. Some of us who have been in government before. Mm-hmm. But let's just make sure that NPA mustn't come up with excuses that I don't have a budget. Same applies with other institutions like police, army, and so on.
Well, interestingly, I had a conversation with the Justice Minister last night, and we were talking about the very NPA that you are talking about, and the fact that, over a week ago or so, they appeared before Parliament, and they spoke about their financial challenges, and so did the SIU. And in the SIU case, they are owed hundreds of millions of rands by, guess who? State departments, who are not paying them. The NPA did say that it has serious financial challenges. And one of the proposals that have been made, you will recall, is that they could, for instance, do some kind of crowdfunding or get the private sector to make available resources and expertise that could help the NPA. And the NPA won't have to be beholden to these people who would be assisting it with financial and other resources. There's a way in which this can be done. It was interesting for me to hear the Minister of Justice saying, Well, yes, that proposal is indeed on the table, but he would prefer that money actually comes from the fiscus. Now, as we all know, especially on the back of the, the COVID-19 pandemic and how we've had to deal with it and how it has set us back as a country, there isn't enough money to go around. But he did expressly said that he would prefer to exhaust other possibilities first before he's actually keen to take up the private sector, on that proposition. So the point I'm making is that a number of these things or decisions actually rest with President Ramaphosa and his cabinet, for which they must take responsibility, where they can't meet our demands on the basis of views that they hold.
Well, these people keep on shifting the goalposts. It shows that their planning cycle leaves much to be desired. I mean, the head of the NPA said she wanted money and the parliament gave her the money. Now, again, when she is supposed to charge people, she's demanding about 2 billion rands more. So, is she a competent person in the first instance? That should be answered by the executive, because they appointed her or recommended her to Parliament. As far as the private sector is concerned, I'm not sure if that is the right approach. It depends on the priorities of the state. We are stealing, the government is stealing millions, if not billions of rands. I mean, the ruling party members through the Auditor General's reports. If those funds were to be controlled properly and channeled to right institutions like SIU and so on, or alternative, what stops us in approaching a country which we have a bilateral agreement for that country to second, underline second some of their experts to help us to deal with this backlog of cases? After all, those people would be better off because they have no vested interest in this case. What we see here, the problem we have, is that the so-called people who are in SIU, who are in NPA, and so on, most of those people are there because they were deployed by the same ruling party which is under scrutiny, whose leaders have siphoned millions of rands. So maybe people from outside would be better off than the private sector and some of the deployees we are having.
Quick last one, General. Yes, I mean, next week's meeting will be about the state capture and the party inquiries. And I know you did say that you will meet beforehand as opposition party leaders. But do you have any thoughts around how you could approach this matter with a view to making sure that nothing like this ever happens again? In other words, how Parliament should proceed on these kinds of matters going forward to avoid a situation where you feel disempowered as the opposition due to, in no small measure, the fact that the ANC has bigger numbers by far. Because at the end of the day, as you would have seen from the state capture inquiry reports or in volumes so far, you're not spared simply because you are the opposition. When the reports talk about Parliament, they talk about Parliament in its broader sense. And yes, credit, of course, should be given where it is due. Fact that, I mean, some of you as opposition parties, together with NGOs and other interest groups, including some from within the ANC, did actually bring things to where they are at the moment. But do you have any thoughts about how you could proceed going forward in a manner that would ensure that Parliament does what it is supposed to do, without the ANC necessarily feeling that there are anti-democracy tendencies that are creeping in? In other words, it's being clipped off its wing purely because it has the numbers that it has.
Well, it is incumbent upon the Speaker to create space for the legislative process to occur. In other words, the recommendations of the Zondo Commission and the Party Commission have referred some of the issues to the law enforcement agencies. But there are certain areas where we would have to change the laws of this country to make sure that this institutionalized corruption must never happen again. Therefore, the Parliament would have to come up with or establish a committee which would go through these findings of these commissions, which would end up as producing better legislation which would close the gaps which seem to be there, where people abuse power just because they have more numbers. They bulldoze other party members with a view to loot the resources or justify the looting of the resources. Yes, we will be going there with an open mind. But the Speaker and the ANC must know that the honeymoon is over.
And that's where we're going to leave it, General. Thank you very much for being generous with your time this evening. And that's the UDM President, General Bantu Olomisa, on the back of that letter that he received from the National Assembly Speaker. Feeling among opposition parties is that she was dragging her feet on the matter of the state capture inquiry and the Mpati inquiry. They sensed a reluctance on her part to deal with these matters and allowing Parliament to play its role. But of course, from the letter the General has received, the meeting is going to take place next week, and opposition parties are going to make known their view about both inquiries, but also how to proceed going forward to ensure that Parliament does play its oversight role and it is not beholden to the President and his executive. Up next, we bring you the latest between the Public Protector and the National Assembly Speaker. They're back in court after Mkhwebane filed an urgent court application aimed at halting the parliamentary impeachment proceedings against them. The matter between Public Protector Advocate Busiwe Mkhwebane and National Assembly Speaker and others has resumed in the Western Cape High Court. Mkhwebane has filed an urgent court application aimed at stopping parliamentary impeachment proceedings against her. Mkhwebane wants the Constitutional Court to reconsider its latest decision, giving the green light to the impeachment proceedings. Parliament has decided to kickstart the process despite Mkhwebane's request for the ConCourt to reconsider its decision. Well, an SABC News interview with Chief Justice Raymond Zondo has now become a point of argument in the matter to stop the parliamentary process. Information was allegedly leaked that a decision around the rescission application was already taken. The public protector's lawyer, Dalim Mpofu, says a case could be made for the Constitutional Court to reconsider its decision. We're now joined by the director of Dubazana Attorneys, Tabbys. Tabbys, good evening. Thanks very much for your time. Of course, I mean, we did know that this was coming. Proceedings, of course, getting underway today.
Yes, that is very true. We were anticipating that this would happen. And as a result of the, like you said, the interview with current Chief Justice. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, continue.
Oh, my apologies. There's two voices. I'm sorry, so I didn't know who I was talking to.
Okay.
So now, as a result of the text message that was sent prior to the Constitutional Court giving its decision, then we are left with a situation whereby currently, I think it's today's hearing, whereby the attorneys for Memkwabani are saying that that leak was to sway the current court's hearing, whereby an interdict is being applied for in order for Parliament to stop the proceedings of Section 194 inquiry. So we are left with the position now wondering, now that the Constitutional Court did not continue with rescinding its own judgment, will this current interdict be seen or granted by the court, especially based on the arguments that have been set forth by Advocate Mpofu?
Just on the email matter, before we go back to the other issues that she has put forward, does she have a case on the leak?
Well, it is highly disturbing that somebody who's not even in the judiciary had such information, although that person is arguing that they were just preempting what would come based on the history of this matter. But the fact that it came out precisely or more or less exactly what, like this person had said to a person who's within the judiciary, and also even though it was a week later than what he had already said there, it is quite disturbing that somebody who's just a lay person in quotes would have access to such information. It is one thing texting somebody, whether in the judiciary or not, and saying, I believe that the outcome would be, not that the Constitutional Court has made its own decision and this is the decision it's coming up within a week. So that is quite disturbing. It makes one wonder, did this person have access to information that was supposed to be private, i.e., the judgment that was supposed to be decided by these justices in the Constitutional Court? Does the Constitutional Court have a leak? It does leave a very big question mark. I don't know whether it is a solid case or not, but it does make one raise their eyebrows at the situation.
Well, concerning and disturbing, as you say, it might be. Is it material to the case she is presenting?
I don't think so, really. Remember, this matter, the application for the interdict was postponed pending the outcome of the Constitutional Court decision. So in any event, whatever was going to be, then this matter would only be postponed until that outcome was done. And also, it also would determine the Section 194 inquiry that is yet to be done in Parliament. I think, I don't know if they're really grabbing at straws, to be quite honest, but there is something there that is worth exploring. And if it brings the reputation of the Constitutional Court into disrepute, it is something worth exploring. I realize that some of the questions that the presiding officers were asking Mpofu today were on the note of whether or not Chief Justice Zondo was lying when he did his press briefing pertaining the outcome of the Constitutional Court decision on the rescission of judgment. And that Mpofu kept quoting that in 3 different occasions, Chief Justice Zondo gave 3 different answers to the same question, whether or not judgment has been made. So it does beg the question that if indeed this decision had not already been made, couldn't it have been that the answer would have been one simple answer on 3 different occasions? So, you know, as Mayor Mkhwebane's attorneys, I understand why they're going that route. It is worth exploring every avenue to make sure that this impeachment does not proceed in the manner that she believes is not correct.
Now, she wants Parliament to halt the impeachment proceedings. She says the Constitutional Court should be allowed to reconsider its decision first before Parliament goes ahead with the impeachment proceedings.
Yes, but the Constitutional Court has already made its decision. It's not going to rescind its own judgment. Remember, in the beginning, she had applied to the Constitutional Court for the direct access in order for the Court to make a decision whether or not the Section 194 inquiry should proceed or not. And they gave they gave Parliament rather a green light to proceed. Now, having done that, she then went back to the Constitutional Court to ask them to relook their own judgment, in whereby the Section 194 inquiry should proceed or not. So hence the judgment that has come out that says there are no merits, or there's no basis basically for the court to relook at its own judgment and rescind it. There's no rescindable arguments within the judgment that was presented that long ago. So as a result, based on that, the Section 194 inquiry does have a green light to proceed, but in the same breath rather, it cannot proceed because of this High Court matter that's currently proceeding, whereby she's asking for an urgent interdict to halt these proceedings, or rather to prevent them from happening. But this High Court matter was going to be as a result of the outcome of the rescission judgment, especially if it was going to be in a positive light for her. But now that it is in the negative, I don't know if the interdict that is currently happening may be granted or not. I think that is why the legal team, Mme Mkhwebane, is pulling mostly on this SMS that was sent out, and that as a result has gotten people, or rather the country, at least the legal sphere, wagging their tongues and asking, how could it be that somebody would know what a judgment is when I, as the person who's appearing on behalf of my client, have no idea what is happening?
And the point of President Cyril Ramaphosa's alleged conflict of interest, and the fact that she wants him to accuse himself, does that remain a matter as well?
I beg your pardon, she wants the Ramaphosa to do what?
To recuse himself, in other words,
Also that I think perhaps when we look back to the appointment of the current Chief Justice, there was a lot of murky water pertaining to that in respect of the fact that the 500,000 that the Ramaphosa or the CR17 campaign had received was deemed not to be anything untoward. It was not out of place. And as a result of that, it was deemed or seen as if Ndate Zondo was appointed by Ndate Ramaphosa in order for him to continue, in quotes, protecting him. Because remember, now that the third installment of the state capture report has come out, Ndate Ramaphosa's son has been implicated for receiving gifts and everything up to the amount of about 3 million rand. So I think that is the basis that they're laying on, that there's a conflict of interest in that he has a vested interest in that if Mme Mkhwebane is not impeached, then she has the right to continue with what she believes is an investigation that has to be probed within the CR17 campaign, and to request that the bank statements and everything of Ndate Ramaphosa be open and be investigated. I think that is where the basis of all of this would be.
Tabbys, thanks very much for your time and insights that matter, of course, being heard before a full bench of the Western Cape High Court. It's going to continue for another day, but that's where we're going to leave it for this evening. And we move to this story now. The Congress of South African Trade Unions, the South African Federation of Trade Unions, South African Communist parties, numerous other organizations of musicians and artists have condemned the Department of Arts and Culture's plan to spend 22 million rand on a national monument flag project. But the department has defended this spend, said the minister, saying it will not only be a tourist attraction, but it will serve as a symbol of unity. But for people like Didi Luzipo, a musician, it's just a continuation of where the minister has left off in his disastrous and undesirable ways. Didi Luzipo joins us on the line. Didi, good evening. Thanks very much for your time. I don't need to ask you what you think of this 22 million rands flag project. You are disgusted.
Disgusted would be an understatement. I think if the minister is not embarrassed now, then I don't know when he will be embarrassed. This is pure disgrace. It's absurd. It's just pure disgrace to the creative industry in its entirety. It's actually unbelievable that in a time and in a country where the economy is ailing and the economy is paralyzed and we've got mass youth unemployment, that we would have the minister and his principal approving a flag that will cost 22 million rand. It's a disgrace.
And for you, it's one among a string of embarrassing moments that you have said before, warrant his dismissal.
Butvuyo, I have been, together with many of my colleagues, we have been pleading, in fact, for his recusal and his removal. However, it has become apparent to me that, he doesn't see any wrong. The fact that he is able to discuss and justify a flag that's going to cost 22 million rand when he hasn't accounted for the PSP funds, he hasn't accounted for COVID-19 relief funds, he hasn't accounted for NAC, he hasn't accounted for the Mzansi Golden Economy funds, he hasn't accounted to NFBF. The list is endless. Those funds to date still have not been dispersed, but still we have him speak comfortably and confidently about a budget allocation of 22 million rand, which is to, I don't know, be a symbol of unity. It's becoming more clearer and clearer that he has no idea what he is doing together with his cabinet. There is no understanding of the creative industry in its entirety. And once again, we're pleading for him to remove himself from this position because he knows nothing about it, and it's clear.
Well, I mean, let's tease out some of the things you just said. I mean, I remember last year when the department announced that it had asked practitioners to submit applications for sustainable projects for the Mzansi Golden Economy project that you've just referred to. Any idea how far that process has gone and whether people like you actually followed up on the calls that the department made?
Well, but like many of the applications that are designed by our department, it's always a case of who do you know in the party, who do you know inside. And the the names and the recipients were released, I think, beginning of this year, if not late last year, I'm not sure. However, there were many questions that were raised around it because of the knowledge that we have of the MGE. We felt that it was unfair. The process of applications was unfair. That the release of these names was unfair. There was no fair criteria and procedure that was taken in making sure that as many artists can benefit from the MGE. It was the same with the COVID-19 relief funds. The COVID-19 relief funds, in the application, we were asked to submit cancellation letters. We were asked to submit SARS documents, tax documents, knowing very well Uguti, creatives, music practitioners and creative practitioners fall in a very difficult tax bracket. You know what I mean? So it's a touch and go situation for us where we have to now submit, because we're not tax compliant. We are seen as a risk. So we are not tax compliant. And I found it very below the belt and very sinister that a department that should know these things was asking us for documents such as these. And those documents were then going to tell whether we are able to, get these relief funds or not. I find it sinister because, all of us are in the same boat. We are all looking for these relief funds. We are all out of work. And for the department to have asked us of those documents was very below the belt. So the same falls with the PSP, same falls with the MGE, same falls with NFVF. All applications of the department are always they're designed to scrutinize artists, basically.
A quick one. I have run out of time, Didi, but I just want clarity. It's one thing to argue impropriety and be as cynical as you are, based, of course, on the experiences of such things as, the proposals are around the Mzansi Golden Economy Project. But it's quite another to argue lack of creativity and lack of, knowledge and expertise, as some of you or some people have been arguing, is the case. For instance, those who say 22 million could have gone into, concerts and other things that could actually generate a lot more money than even the 22 million rands itself. For you, which one is it? Very briefly.
22 million could definitely go into plowing back to the creative industry, making sure that the industry gets back on its feet. Needless to say, a number of festivals, a number of events were cancelled over the past 2 years. In fact, we have not been working over the past 2 years. And I would have suggested that 22 million rand goes into rather spending on making sure that the creative industry is back on its feet again. Okay. To take that money and put it into a vanity project is unbelievable. I'd like to plead to the minister and his principal to try and relook the strategy of taking funds and putting them in a political game of some sort. Okay. This is not a game. This is our lives. This we've been living this, and we need as much support as we can from them.
Okay. Didi Luzipo, thanks very much for your time this evening. To this now, before we end the show, former Johannesburg Mayor Mpho Moerane has died. His family confirmed this at the Mill Park Hospital in Johannesburg earlier. Moerane was in a coma after a car crash last week. He's the second Johannesburg mayor to have died in less than a year. Moerane became the city's mayor following the death of Jolie D. Matongo. We're now joined by the sitting mayor of Johannesburg, Mpho Palatse. Mayor, good evening. Thanks very much for your time. Your fondest memory of Mpho?
Well, Mpho and I shared a friend. We had a mutual friend in the former mayor who also passed on after a car accident, Mayor Jolie D. Matongo. When we first met, we actually met on social media under very unpleasant circumstances where we had a fight on social media. And we were then reintroduced by Jolie D. where we made peace and we agreed to be friends. It was at a time when they had taken over the city. And yeah, we had good relations then. On the day of my election, he walked over to me and, you know, he could see that we're going to win. And he said to me, look, we'll work with you, we will support you, provided you take care of our wards as well. And I said, yes, of course, we will take care of the whole of the city. And that's how he pledged his support. And he has been very supportive, even though we had some difficulties initially in council, as you will recall. Towards the end, he was really becoming an ally, and we were beginning to see a maturity in our democracy where we were starting to work together.
So he did deliver on a promise that he made, in spite of the fact that you were at opposite ends of the political spectrum, so to speak. How do you think those who have, all of you, in fact, I should say, who remain behind, should or could best, honor his legacy?
Well, I mean, I think if we work together, it's often tempting as political parties in council to be fighting each other all the time. I think we can remember where he was when his last day in council, how he was supportive of progress, how he wanted to see progress, and he was fair, and he was fair firstly to himself, to his political party, but also fair to residents and to what needed to happen in council. So he knew when to be tough, he knew when to ask tough questions. Often we would convene and ask each other, will you support us on this item? Will you support us on this item? And he was very honest in saying, this one we will support, but this one we will not support. And I saw a maturity in him that I believe we need to carry on with in council. I believe that if we continue that way, we'll get a lot done for our residents.
That's where we're going to leave it. Thank you, Mayor, for your time this evening. The sitting Mayor of Johannesburg, paying tribute to the former Mayor of Johannesburg, who passed on earlier this evening. May his soul rest in peace. And that's our show for this evening. Do join us again tomorrow night, same time. Have a good night.